Also, what's come in since we last were together on this show, I think, was Midnight Gospel.
Yes.
Yeah.
I think so.
So talk to people about that, because I that show, people fucking love that show, and I do too. Talk about it.
Well,
how did it happen? What was it? You know,
it was so. One day I get this email from Pendleton Ward, who I only knew as the creator of Adventure Time, one of the greatest animated series of all time, and I just started podcasting was still new. This was still when podcasting was relatively new. So back then, I don't think anybody really understood the effect of podcasting, that you're putting stuff out there. You don't know who's listening. You don't know who's...
Well, your podcast was pretty successful pretty early, right?
Really not compared to the way podcasts are now.
Well, but I remember I love doing your podcast. I ran into a lot of people that liked your podcast.
And this was earlier than you doing it.
Okay.
See, that you and me being friends even. You know what I mean? I never would have, when I started podcasting, I wouldn't have been like, one day you're going to be friends with Dr. Drew. I would never have thought that. We just thought it was cool. It was a fun way to have conversations.
Yeah.
So I'm talking early days.
Yeah.
And I got an email from Penn Ward being like, hey, I really like your podcast. And I was just like, that's a troll. There's no way the creator of Adventure Time is listening to my podcast. It was just a real mind-blowing moment. And then,
did you follow up to ask him to come on the podcast?
We got to be friends.
Oh my gosh.
Back then, man, I was dead broke. I'd had a podcast with Natasha Leggero called The Lavender Hour. That's when I started podcasting. We broke up. I don't know why. It's weird. Sometimes it seems like women don't like supporting you when you don't have a job. Have you ever noticed that? Is that in medical stuff?
No,
is there something out there?
There is something about what makes women attractive to men that includes not being dependent on them.
Right. It's not like when you tell them that maybe you're going to start making fountains to make money.
Was that your plan at the time?
Yeah. Maybe I'll be a fountain builder. I'll start selling cool fountains. So,
and did she get married soon after that?
Soon after that, she met Moshe.
Yeah.
And they had the most amazing kid, and it was it's perfect.
That worked out for her.
Yeah. Oh God, it was a great move. Great move. I needed it. She needed it.
Okay,
what am I going to do? What would I be doing right now? Imagine if my fountain business had taken off. What kind of weird life would I be in right now?
What kind of fountain? Like the little fountains you get at a Zen flower shop?
True.
Or you're going to build the Trevi fountain, a big monuments.
I was, how depression works, right? You're not in therapy. You need to be in therapy.
Yes.
You've got all this unacknowledged shit. You're in a kind of stupor.
You get grandiose.
You get grandiose but crazy, but you just want to sleep. It was just a whole maelstrom of bad news, basically. So basically, I started my own podcast, the Duncan Trussell Family Hour, and then started doing that, taking it seriously. Then Penn reached out to me.
So Natasha, you're broken up. You're doing the podcast. Penn reaches out.
Penn reaches out, and at some point, he's like, I have an idea for how to maybe do the podcast as a cartoon.
Right in the early days.
This was pretty early.
Had he been on the podcast, or he just was a fan?
I think he came on the podcast with Jesse Moynihan, who ended up doing some of the art, a lot of the art for the Midnight Gospel. So,
did you talk about it when he was a guest on the podcast?
No. He invited me out to coffee. And because Adventure Time had just ended, or he'd left Adventure Time, I don't remember. And we're at coffee, and somewhere as we're talking, probably something I don't know if it's something I did, or he just, at some point, he's just, I just think I'm too busy to really do this. It was like I tried to not cry. You know what I mean? Because I'm making money selling posters at that time. I'm going down to Costco and printing posters that I'm mailing out to sell. I'm subletting a place. So, yeah, it was. I remember walking to my car well, it's okay. We'll just try to sell some more posters. But yeah, then years later, he reaches out to me. He's like, I think I'm ready to do that now. And so that is.
Did he explain to you what his idea was in the first incarnation?
Kind of, but not really. Like
Okay.
he's a genius. And
I know. And I remember when you pitched it to me, you had trouble describing it. Just you'll see when you get here, kind of
that.
thing.
Yeah, right.
And then I had the experience of didn't know who the guy was in the booth directing me, and was like, "Holy shit, who is that? That guy knows exactly what he's doing. I can't believe how." Fucking, targeted he was.
I know, it's so wild.
And I ran into him in the parking lot. Well, keep going your part. We'll talk about our.
Well, that's pretty much it. Like,
how does he pitch it to you? Because it's so odd.
Well, we started talking about it. Like, how would we do it? Like, he had it popped into his head. Like, what happens if we make the dialogue for the podcast?
But I'm imagining if somebody pitched that to me, I would imagine sort of us as cartoon characters sort of sitting talking.
That's it.
Yeah.
That's right. That's
not what it was.
No. That's what the genius was like. What if we do the dialogue? They're having the conversations, but it's like an adventure, or they're in some weird world, or so we're going to take the podcast dialogue, attach it to an
adventure.
An adventure.
And who two things. Who came up with the character? Right.
Yeah.
And the whole time machine or whatever the hell that vagina was. and then who went from the conversation to seeing the adventure? Because I would never in a million years have seen what he drew.
Well, that was us just talking. And I've always been really interested.
You and him talking.
Yes.
Yeah.
I've been into simulation theory, it's so cool. It's such a fun thought experiment.
Yeah.
So the idea of someone going into a simulator to harvest novelty like that, it was just us bouncing ideas. And then he would sketch and draw. He started drawing the world of the chromatic ribbon. And, it was just this wonderful collaboration. And not just with him, I mean, with so many just geniuses at Titmouse, the animation studio that did it. And so, it just sort of grew. It grew out of all of these minds.
They just know what they're doing.
They know what they're doing, and Pendleton knows how to bring people together, harmonize them,
and create.
Create
in a way that moves forward and bears fruit.
That's it. And empower. He's so good at empowering people around him and letting you, he encouraged me to do those weird songs in every episode. I never would have done that in a million years. But he brings that out of people.
Yeah,
he's like, why don't you do that? And he's so
that's a wonderful quality. I wrote
is.
a book once with Judith Regan, who is a famous editor, and that's how I felt talking to her. She was just bringing stuff out of me. I was like, I don't know what she's doing, but I'm responding. That is one of the great talents. Superpower. It's a superpower.
Well, yeah, city. In one of the words for it is a city. People talk about if you meditate long enough, you hear a lot of bullshit maybe you can levitate or walk through walls or turn into a rainbow or stuff like that. Yeah. But really, it doesn't have to be through meditation, but really there's better powers.
Powerful hallucinogens, I suspect.
Well, yeah, maybe. You definitely might think you're walking through a wall until
right.
you wake up with a black eye. But if you think about those things that you hear about or you watch in the Kung Fu movies, cool, whatever. But there's actually more, I think, pragmatic ways that people can become magical, which is just what you're talking about there, where you're around someone and somehow you feel funnier, or there's a resonance happening or something. They know how to bring good stuff out of you. Sadly, it works the opposite way too.
People can suck it the other direction. Suck shit out of you. Pendleton can make a great cartoon out of this. What we're just talking about. So why doesn't he do it? Why did the cartoon get dropped? Why is Netflix
from
doing
Netflix?
That? Yes.
Well,
he needs to do it again. He needs to take it somewhere else.
Netflix, their business model is. I think this is I speculate. I mean, the thing is, I can't have real bitterness about it because the executives I worked with were so awesome, and they were they let us make the show, and but I think the business model for Netflix is do a lot of
first runs,
hit the Stranger Things, and then pour the money into that.
So they have to really hit in order for them to be recurrences.
Exactly.
So let's tell them more about how this came to be. So you're developing this thing because it's still not clear to me how our conversation on your podcast became the adventure that he envisioned, with the little president and all this stuff.
The zombies.
The zombies. Is that something you were thinking about?
No, I'm pretty sure he came up with President Dr. Drew. I'm pretty sure he came up with that. And yeah, he did. He did. You know what he did? He drew okay, yeah, now I remember. So we pitched it with an animatic, just a shitty little low res line drawing
off the podcast still.
Off the podcast.
So the audio was the podcast.
He grabs our episode, he puts the audio into the animatic, he draws a little President Dr. Drew fighting zombies with us talking on the rooftop of the White House. It's so funny. We bring it in, show it to them as proof of concept, and everyone laughed. It's funny. And so that's what sold it.
Wow.
Along with, Pendleton being involved. But then that was like 3 minutes. The animatic was 3 minutes.
Yeah.
We had to figure out a way to do that for 20 minutes of a conversation with animation.
Well, and by the way, you'd have an arc of this multi-episode thing now you had to invent too.
That's it. So there were a lot of problems that appeared in the process of making the thing that by the end we figured it out.
Christina was one of the voices, I'm just remembering.
That's right.
Yeah.
Christina was one of the voices. Yeah, she was Clancy's sister.
Right.
That's right. Yeah. Yeah.
So funny.
Oh man, it was the best. Making that was so fun.
Well, now here's the other part. So explain to them how we ended up in a sound booth. So here was just our audio from our podcast, but then we still needed to do some more audio.
Yes. Okay. So essentially we realized that you have to glue. It's like you have to pin the dialogue to the animation, or otherwise it becomes like animation with the background sound of a podcast.
Yes.
So you've got to connect the conversation to what's happening. You can't have zombies running around and not acknowledge there's zombies running around. Right. So, but if you do too much of that, then it distracts from the conversation.
Yes.
So it's a balancing act. And so we had you come in because we needed you to react to like machine
So there's a lot of, hey, whoa.
Yeah. I remember we were like, will he say that? Will he say fuck? Can we?
And then we had to sing the song at the end. You're just sing with me, sing along. Don't worry about it.
That's right. But you got a great voice. I didn't know that then.
Oh God. But it's the amazing thing to me was I couldn't really visualize we didn't see it yet. Right? There was nothing really to see. You were kind of showing me little sketches and stuff.
Yeah.
And Pendleton came in and goes, no, I need this. This is what I need.
Yep.
And when I would do it, I would go, oh, I can tell that's something right.
Oh.
And I thought, and I ran into him in the parking lot. We went and actually did a podcast that same day, I think, or one of the other times I was in there. And I ran into him walking across the parking lot because your podcast studio was across the parking lot, remember? And I didn't know who he was. I just thought he was the guy in there directing or something. And I stopped him. I said, where did you, I see how extraordinary what you do is.
Right.
Where did you learn this? And he was just like, no, I've just been doing it for a while. Very humble.
Very humble.
Super humble.
Yeah.
And I didn't know who he was at that point. I had no idea.
Yeah, for sure. That guy is just one of a kind.
Yeah.
Just completely unique, amazing human.
And so I'll ask again, where did the vagina come from?
That was Pendleton.
People can watch this now, right? Can they go on Netflix?
Yeah,
and watch
it's on Netflix.
Right, Midnight Gospel. Go watch it.
Yeah.
So we're talking about the number one episode. The other episode is 7 and 8 with your mom.
8. The last episode's with my mom.
8 and 9, 7 and 8.
It's just 10. One episode. It's 8.
I swear it was 2 with your mom. That was just one episode.
There was 2 podcasts with my mom.
Oh.
But there's just we took the audio from both.
I see. Maybe that's where I got that in my head.
Yeah, that's where I got it.
Susan, my wife, just burst into tears during that, and I've talked to many other people who had a similar reaction.
Same.
Yeah.
Same. Yeah, I'm so happy that got out there. People. This is a doctor. Like, we are so like grief illiterate in our society, in our culture.
Not your mom.
Not my mom. And dying people become very literate in dying.
I've dealt with it a lot.
Not all of them.
Some do, some don't. Your mom was on it.
Well, she did it consciously. Yeah, she did. You can die consciously. You don't have to like.
Whoa.
Yeah, great. It's like sometimes I fantasize that like when we do die, And we realized, oh, you don't really die. This whole thing is like some kind of training, teaching, whatever, maybe recreational activity. But like after we died, did they are there shows where they're like, look at this amazing death? That was incredible. That was like a 10 out of 10 death.
Like Pendleton's on the other side making cartoons out of it.
Yeah, right. It's like we think it's such a big deal over on this side of things, as you should. We don't know what's on the other side, but once it happens, it's like, wow, that's like Olympic diving.
Like when you get across.
Yeah, amazing death. Well done. It's like a triple backflip
Oh my
death.
God, that's funny. Anyway, so do go watch Midnight Gospel. What we're talking about is this one episode where we did a podcast about essentially legalization of cannabis, essentially we were talking about. And then his mom did a couple of pods with Duncan where it was her end of her life.
That's right.
And she was sharing some profound feelings and thoughts. And the way he animated that was also made it very intense.
She died 2 weeks after that.
Oh, man. I don't know where to go after thinking about her because we have silliness to talk about. Should we just do it?
You don't know how to go into jokes from talking about my mom's death?